I will give now the floor to my friend Warren, and I'm so impressed by what you have done in the UK government to optimize procurement, because I think procurement is one of our main challenges moving quickly to the SDGs. So Warren.
Thank you very much, Carrie. But thank you also for the opportunity to speak and to join the community. I think just it's very apparent the obvious linkages and synergies between initiatives like Be Smart City. So I think U4SSE is the perfect platform for that level of collaboration, and I'm very excited by what the opportunities might be for that. So so I'm Warren Smith. I'm the Director of the Global Digital Marketplace Programme. We're part of the UK government's digital service. And actually, so we're a bit like a startup in government. I didn't have to leave my job, but I did get funding from another part of government to start the program. I also had the opportunity yesterday to talk as part of this smart governance session, and hopefully the slides for that are available to the audience. That was a more detailed presentation to the one that I have here. In essence, I just want to share with you the experience of the UK government over the last 10 years now of reimagining public procurement for the internet era. It's fair to say that before we started, public procurement was perhaps somewhat lagging behind some of the innovations that were taking place. I think I'm being polite to say that it was stuck in the 20th century. I think there were certain elements that were still kind of quite 19th century. So we had to completely reimagine public procurement to support the government's digital data and technology transformation ambitions. And that meant setting new standards and absolutely being obsessively focused on meeting the needs of our users. So for us, that's citizens, businesses, civil society at large. And so really, in thinking about procurement, it's absolutely necessary to think of what happens before as well as what happens after, because what we found at the time before we started was that public procurement really existed in a vacuum. It really didn't have any association with the planning, the strategic investment appraisal, the market engagement that leads to the procurement taking place. So this is where we've set up, and from top left down to bottom right, the technology code of practice, and this is what we use to assure all of government spend on ICT, basically. Back in 2009, government was spending about £16 billion a year on tech, and 80% of that was with just 18 very large suppliers. So we had to change the supply chain to enable a much more diverse range of suppliers to gain access to that, and the key mechanism for doing that is the technology code of practice. We then had to also think about how we then procured in order to meet the needs of what was being planned for in the tech code of practice, and that's where we set up the digital marketplace. I'll come back onto that in a second. And then once a contract is awarded, we then need to assure that service delivery, again through a set of standards, and that's where we use the service standard. So those top three tiles of the tech code of practice, digital marketplace, and service standard effectively represent the end-to-end continuous life cycle of planning, procurement, delivery, planning, procurement, delivery. We also needed to ensure that there was much greater transparency in the way that government was planning and spending public funds. So relatively recently, I can't remember the exact date, but we formally adopted the Open Contracting Data Standard. So that's a structured data schema that covers the entire end-to-end life cycle of spending. So that's now an official UK government standard. We've also focused on building capability and capacity in the procurement function of government. So we set up the digital buying community. I think there's some really interesting opportunities for how we could perhaps collaborate with Be Smart City to support those community efforts. And finally, we've also collaborated with the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government on what's called the Local Digital Declaration. And that's in recognition of the fact that at the heart of the reforms, there's a set of consistent standards which are all about reform of public service delivery. It's not about central government or local government, it's about collaboration across those organisational boundaries, across those funding boundaries, and actually all coalescing around meeting the needs of our citizens. Local Digital Declaration was only launched in July last year, and there's now over 200 local authorities who've actually signed up to that declaration, and at the heart of it are all the previous 5 tiles within that presentation. So those are effectively the building blocks that have helped us to get from a pretty bleak situation in 2009, represented by the map in the bottom right corner, to a very different supply chain today, where we have thousands of digital data and technology suppliers. Over 90% of them are small, medium-sized companies. So our procurement journey, reforming procurement, has very much been in line with the UK government's digital transformation, which has been through 4 phases really since 2010 to our present day. You can have a look at that from the link provided there. So really, this is a distillation of that experience. We've made some mistakes, and we're happy to share what those mistakes are so that others don't have to make the same mistakes as we did. And I think it was encouraging to hear that that's also a consistent approach with other U4SSC initiatives. So, in closing, I'd like to effectively pitch that we develop guidelines for public procurement in support of delivering smart, sustainable cities, and an associated set of KPIs that helps us along that way, and very much hoping that's an initiative that would be supported by the ITU and U4SSC. So we will basically kick that off subject to approval, and look to deliver that by April next year, and that's the end of my pitch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Warren. I appreciate very much this suggestion, which we really favor.